In the heart of 19th century Italy, in a small town called Assisi, there was born one who would become one of the great models of youthful holiness, Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows. Baptized with the name Francesco Possenti, he came into the world on March 1st, 1838, into a large and devout family. From an early age, he showed himself to be an intelligent, amiable young man with great charisma, traits that would make him beloved by all around him. Raised in a Catholic home, Francesco had his faith nurtured by his parents, especially his mother, Agnese, who taught him the principles of devotion and trust in God. His father, Sante Possenti, was a prestigious man, serving as governor of Spoleto, which afforded the family a comfortable life and respect in society. However, God had grand plans for young Francesco, who would gradually begin to notice signs of divine grace in his life. Even as a child, he suffered a painful loss with his mother's death, which brought him deep sorrow. This event marked his childhood and strengthened his inclination toward piety, for he sought comfort for his soul in prayer and devotion to the Blessed Virgin. However, like many young people his age, he also got involved in worldly pleasures, enjoying parties, balls, and the conveniences of an active social life. Francesco's youth was marked by a constant duality between God's call and the distractions of worldly life. Brilliant in his studies, he excelled in rhetoric and literature, earning the respect of his teachers and classmates. He was known for his refinement and elegance, always well-dressed and possessing great skill in dance and music. His natural talent for social interaction earned him many friends and admirers. Nevertheless, Francesco did not feel fully satisfied with this life of vanity. In his heart, there was a profound restlessness, a thirst for something greater than the fleeting pleasures of the world. He felt drawn to spirituality, but his attachment to social conventions and human desires prevented him from taking a decisive step toward God's will. Still, divine providence was already preparing the exact moment for his definitive conversion. The great turning point in his life occurred during a serious illness that brought him to the brink of death. In his distress, he made a promise to the Virgin Mary that if he recovered, he would dedicate his life entirely to God. Miraculously, his health was restored, but upon recovering, he hesitated to fulfill his promise. His heart was still divided between grace and the world, and the young man continued to frequent the social circles he so enjoyed. God, however, did not give up on him. In 1856, during a procession in honor of Our Lady, Francesco had a profound mystical experience. Upon seeing the image of the Virgin Mary, he felt in his heart an irresistible call to abandon everything and follow Christ. Mary's words echoed in his soul like a definitive command: "Francesco, the world is not for you." Confronted with this overwhelming experience, he made the firm decision to leave his worldly life and enter religious life. To the surprise of his family and friends, Francesco announced his intention to become a Passionist religious, an order known for its strict observance of penance and devotion to the Passion of Christ. His father initially resisted the idea, as he wanted his son to pursue a prestigious career, but the young man was determined. Nothing would stop him from responding to the divine call, and so he began his journey toward holiness. In September 1856, Francesco Possenti entered the novitiate of the Congregation of the Passion of Jesus Christ, known as the Passionists. Upon donning the religious habit, he received a new name, Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows. This name symbolized his special devotion to the Virgin Mary and his unity with the sufferings of Christ. From that moment on, he began a life of intense prayer, penance, and total surrender to God. In the monastery, St. Gabriel stood out for his humility, charity, and spirit of sacrifice. Though he came from a wealthy family, he quickly adapted to the simple and austere life of the Passionists. He faced privations joyfully, seeing in them an opportunity to unite himself more deeply with the suffering of Christ. His devotion to the Virgin Mary grew each day, and he became an example of fervor and piety to his religious brothers. His religious life was marked by an ardent love for the cross and a constant desire for sanctification. Saint Gabriel adopted a rigorous discipline, renouncing any type of comfort and dedicating himself entirely to prayer and service. Despite his young age, he demonstrated an impressive spiritual maturity, always seeking to live in God's presence and to offer himself as a victim of love for the redemption of souls. Devotion to the Passion of Christ and to Our Lady of Sorrows became the center of his spiritual life. He would spend hours in meditation before the crucifix, contemplating the sufferings of Jesus and desiring to unite himself with him in sacrifice. His love for Mary was so intense that he often recited the rosary with tears in his eyes, deeply feeling the sorrows she endured upon seeing her son suffer. Writings and testimonies about St. Gabriel portray a young man with a pure heart, who radiated joy and holiness. His smile was constant, even in difficulties, for he saw in every trial an opportunity to love God more. He never complained about penances or the challenges of convent life. On the contrary, he embraced them enthusiastically, knowing they were the means of attaining Christian perfection. The superiors of the convent quickly noticed his holiness and fervor. They admired his spirit of obedience and humility, always willing to carry out any task, no matter how simple. He never sought prominence or recognition, preferring to remain hidden and silent, living in total conformity with the divine will. However, the cross he loved so much did not take long to manifest itself more intensely in his life. At the age of 23, St. Gabriel was struck by tuberculosis, a disease that had no cure at the time. Rather than lament his illness, he saw it as a gift from God, an opportunity to unite himself even more to the suffering of Christ. His spirit did not falter. On the contrary, he accepted the disease with astonishing serenity. Even weakened by illness, he continued to demonstrate unshakable faith and absolute trust in divine providence. He never complained of physical pain, but offered everything out of love for God and for the salvation of souls. His example of patience and resignation deeply edified his brothers in the monastery, who saw in him a true saint preparing for eternal glory. As the disease advanced, his condition worsened daily, but St. Gabriel always kept a smile on his face. He often said that his greatest desire was to die young, consumed by love for God. For him, life was a brief passage toward eternity, and all that mattered was living in union with Christ until the final moment. In his last moments of life, his soul was completely surrendered to God. In the days before his death, his gaze shone with a celestial light, and his heart overflowed with peace. Surrounded by his religious brothers, he died in a holy manner on February 27, 1862, at just 24 years old, pronouncing the names of Jesus and Mary with his final breaths. News of his death spread quickly, and many already considered him a saint. His tomb soon became a place of pilgrimage, where countless graces and miracles were reported by those who sought his intercession. His testimony of youthful holiness inspired countless faithful to follow the path of purity, penance, and total surrender to God. In 1920, Pope Benedict XV canonized St. Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows, officially recognizing his holiness and his powerful witness of faith. Today, he is regarded as the patron saint of Catholic youth and a model of ardent love for Christ and the Virgin Mary. His life continues to illuminate generations, showing that true happiness is found in total surrender to God. Did you like the first part? Can I continue with the next? You said, continue. ChatGPT said, after his canonization, devotion to Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows quickly spread to various parts of the world. His story inspired young people and adults alike to seek holiness in the simplicity of daily life, renouncing the vanities of the world to follow Christ with a pure and generous heart. Churches, chapels, and schools were dedicated to him, becoming centers of spirituality and conversion. His tomb, located in the sanctuary of Isola del Gran Sasso in Italy, became one of the country's most significant pilgrimage sites. Every year, thousands of faithful visit the sanctuary to request his intercession, to give thanks for favors received, and to renew their faith. Reports of healings, conversions, and miracles continue to be recorded, confirming the powerful intercession of the young saint. One of the most notable aspects of Saint Gabriel's spirituality was his intense devotion to the Virgin Mary. He not only prayed the Rosary constantly, but also meditated deeply on the sorrows that Our Lady endured throughout Jesus' life. This compassion for Mary led him to a growing love for the crucified Christ, desiring to unite himself with him in redemptive suffering. His example became a genuine beacon for Catholic youth. In a world that offers so many fleeting and empty attractions, St. Gabriel reminds us that true joy lies in friendship with God. He teaches that holiness is not something distant or impossible, but a call accessible to all who wish to live in union with Christ and Mary. During his short life, St. Gabriel showed that it is possible to attain holiness even amid the struggles and challenges of youth. He was not a young man free from temptations or difficulties, but he knew how to place his trust in God and overcome worldly inclinations with an ardent love for the cross. His witness remains a model for those seeking a life of purity and dedication to God. The Passionist congregation, of which St. Gabriel was a member, saw in him a perfect example of the order's charism. His life was a true imitation of the Passion of Christ, lived in humility, in love of the cross, and in total surrender to the divine will. For this reason, he is regarded as one of the great Passionist saints, alongside St. Paul of the Cross, the order's founder. St. Gabriel's spirit profoundly influenced Passionist spirituality. His writings and testimonies of life are studied and meditated upon by both religious and laity who wish to delve deeper into the mystery of Christ's redemptive suffering. His love for the cross and his joy amid difficulties serve as a reminder that the true disciple of Christ must carry his cross with love and hope. Saint Gabriel is also a special intercessor for those who face illness and physical suffering. His own experience with tuberculosis showed how sickness can be lived as a path to sanctification. He accepted his illness with serenity and trust, offering up his pains to God in union with Christ's sufferings. Many devotees turned to Saint Gabriel, asking for strength and patience to endure life's crosses. Whether in moments of physical pain or spiritual trials, he teaches that it is possible to find joy and meaning in suffering when one trusts in divine grace. His testimony of faith is a source of consolation for those going through difficult times. In addition to being a patron of youth, St. Gabriel is also invoked as a protector of seminarians and those called to religious life. His own vocational journey, marked by struggles and hesitations, inspires those who feel God's call but are afraid to renounce the world. He teaches that following Christ requires courage but brings eternal rewards. During his formation in the monastery, St. Gabriel stood out for his humility and obedience, essential qualities for anyone who wishes to consecrate their life to God. His example encourages seminarians and religious to persevere in their vocation, trusting that God's grace is enough to overcome any obstacle. In many parts of the world, Saint Gabriel is honored with festivals and processions, especially in Italy, where his devotion is most intense. On February 27th, his liturgical commemoration is observed with solemn masses and devotions, recalling his life and teachings. Many young people participate in these celebrations, renewing their commitment to the Christian faith. St. Gabriel's message is particularly timely in an age when so many young people drift away from the faith, seduced by the world's empty promises. He shows that it is possible to live with joy and fulfillment within the Church, cultivating a profound friendship with God and placing prayer at the center of one's life. His life teaches that true happiness does not lie in passing pleasures, but in total surrender to Christ. He recognized the futility of worldly things and chose a path of renunciation and love, finding far greater joy than any entertainment could offer. St. Gabriel also reminds us of the importance of listening to God's voice and responding generously to his call. He could have led a comfortable, prestigious life, but he chose instead to follow Mary's invitation, renouncing the world in order to attain the glory of heaven. His radical decision is a witness that it is worth giving everything for Christ. Many young people who hear his story are touched by his courage and desire for holiness. He proves that one does not have to wait for old age to seek God with all one's heart. Holiness is a call for everyone, regardless of age or circumstances in life. Saint Gabriel teaches us that the path to holiness involves love of the cross. He embraced suffering with serenity and trust, understanding that every pain offered to God has infinite value. This teaching is a comfort to those who face difficulties and trials in life. His love for the Virgin Mary continues to inspire the faithful around the world. He demonstrated that devotion to Our Lady is not mere sentimentality, but a sure path to union with Christ. Whoever loves Mary finds in her a kind mother who leads her children to heaven. Many miracles have been attributed to Saint Gabriel's intercession, both in the past and today. Inexplicable cures, sudden conversions, and special graces testify to the power of his prayer before God. His tomb continues to be a place of abundant graces. St. Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows' life is an invitation to live the faith with authenticity and fervor. His example challenges us to abandon spiritual lukewarmness and to seek a deeper relationship with God. He shows us that true happiness is found in total surrender to the Lord. Amid a world that offers so many distractions and superficialities, Saint Gabriel emerges as a model of purity, prayer, and sacrifice. He teaches us that holiness is possible for all who open themselves to divine grace and truly desire to follow Christ. His story continues to echo in the hearts of many faithful, reminding us that there is no greater joy than belonging entirely to God. His testimony of a simple and fervent life is a light for those seeking deeper meaning in their existence. The Church continues to promote devotion to Saint Gabriel, encouraging the faithful to imitate his virtues and seek his intercession. He remains a great example of love for God, fidelity to one's calling, and trust in divine providence. By looking at this young saint's life, we understand that holiness is not something distant or unattainable. Saint Gabriel teaches us that by putting God first, we find true peace and the fullness of the Christian life. His legacy remains alive, inspiring new generations to walk the path of faith with courage and determination. Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows continues to be a sure guide for those who wish to give themselves completely to the love of Christ and his Holy Mother. Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows' spirituality was not limited to his own time. On the contrary, his influence grew over the years, crossing borders and cultures. His example of youthful holiness became a model for those who wish to live their faith with authenticity and fervor, especially in times of spiritual and moral crisis. Many saints and popes have cited him as an example to be followed. St. John Paul II, a great encourager of Catholic youth, often recalled St. Gabriel's life as a witness that it is possible to live with purity and joy in service to God, even amid trials. His simple life and his total surrender to the divine will are an invitation for all to seek holiness in everyday life. In various parts of the world, Catholic youth movements have taken St. Gabriel as their patron and inspiration. His story especially resonates with those who seek a deeper meaning in life and wish to escape the world's fleeting illusions. His love for the cross teaches that true happiness is not found in momentary pleasure, but in generous surrender to God's call. Many young people experiencing vocational crises find in St. Gabriel a friend and intercessor. He who hesitated to follow his calling, but then gave himself completely to God, inspires those who fear leaving everything to follow Christ. His witness shows that God's grace is sufficient to overcome all doubts and human resistance. Besides young people, Saint Gabriel is also a great intercessor for families. He himself came from a Christian home where he learned the values of faith and prayer. Many families turned to him, asking for his protection and help in raising holy and faithful children who seek God above all else. His example demonstrates the impact of an upbringing based on faith and love of God. Another striking aspect of St. Gabriel's life was his constant joy, even in the face of suffering. He never saw the cross as an unbearable burden, but as a means of sanctification. This attitude inspires those who face difficulties to see their pain as opportunities to grow spiritually and unite themselves to the crucified Christ. St. Gabriel's simplicity is also a profound lesson for our current times, when so many seek status, wealth, and recognition. He who was born into a privileged family gave it all up to follow a path of humility and evangelical poverty. His detachment from the world teaches us that true riches lie in God, not in material possessions. In many regions of the world, devotion to St. Gabriel has grown significantly, especially among young people who seek a model of purity and surrender to God. His name is mentioned in catechesis, spiritual retreats, and evangelization gatherings, serving as an inspiration for those who desire to grow in the faith. The sanctuary of St. Gabriel, located in Isola del Gran Sasso, remains one of Italy's most visited sites. Each year, thousands of pilgrims travel to his tomb to pray, to thank him for graces received, and to ask for his intercession. Many testify to experiencing a profound peace upon visiting the place where his mortal remains rest. Among the accounts of favors received through his intercession, there are many cases of miraculous healings, especially among young people who are gravely ill. His intercession before God has consoled many families who turn to him with faith and trust. The Church continues to acknowledge the power of his intercession through the testimonies of the faithful. St. Gabriel is also known as a great intercessor for those who struggle against temptations and spiritual difficulties. Many appeal to him for help to overcome sin and live a life closer to God. His example of renouncing the world and loving the cross inspires those who want to live their faith more fervently. His story continues to touch hearts because it shows that holiness is not reserved only for great mystics or church leaders, but is a call open to all. St. Gabriel was a young man like any other, but he decided to give himself fully to God, and in so doing, he achieved a glory the world could never offer. The love St. Gabriel had for the Passion of Christ was extraordinary. He spent hours meditating on Jesus' sufferings and offered all his own pains in union with the Savior. This spirituality of the cross is a significant teaching for today, when many people seek only comfort and ease. His devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows was inseparable from his spirituality. He understood that Mary suffered deeply as she watched her son endure torment, and so he united himself to her in prayer, offering his own pains as a small sacrifice of love. His example teaches that the best way to draw near to Jesus is through the maternal heart of Mary. St. Gabriel's message is extremely relevant for today's youth, in a world where so many are lost to vices, pleasures, and fleeting illusions. He reminds us that true happiness lies in friendship with God. His constant smile, even in suffering, is proof that one who gives their life to Christ never loses genuine joy. In many dioceses worldwide, youth groups organize meetings and retreats inspired by St. Gabriel's life. His testimony is presented as a model of attainable and possible holiness, even for those facing struggles and challenges. He demonstrates that God's grace can transform any heart. In addition to the churches and chapels dedicated to him, many Catholic schools bear his name, inspiring children and teenagers to grow in faith and love of God. His life is often studied in catechism classes, encouraging young people to seek a deeper relationship with Christ. Pope Benedict XV, when canonizing him, emphasized that St. Gabriel is an example of how youth can be holy without ceasing to be cheerful and vibrant. His life contradicts the idea that the Christian faith is sad or burdensome, showing that a true disciple of Christ finds joy even in difficulties. Saint Gabriel teaches us that to attain holiness, it is necessary to have a pure heart and a sincere love for God. He did nothing extraordinary in the eyes of the world, but he lived each day with intensity and fervor, seeking to please the Lord in all things. His story continues to be an invitation for each of us to reflect on our own spiritual journey. He reminds us that each one of us is called to holiness, regardless of our age or circumstances. His example shows that following Christ is the wisest and most beautiful decision a person can make. In times of such spiritual and moral confusion, Saint Gabriel becomes a sure guide for those who wish to remain faithful to the faith. He teaches that, even amid temptations and difficulties, it is possible to stay firm and persevere on the path of holiness. His love for the Eucharist was another remarkable aspect of his spiritual life. He understood that Jesus was truly present in the consecrated host, and thus he made Mass and adoration central moments of his life. That love for the Eucharist continues to inspire the faithful to deepen their relationship with Christ. By looking at his life, we see that God chooses simple instruments to manifest his glory. Saint Gabriel was neither a great preacher, nor did he perform extraordinary feats, yet his fidelity to divine grace made him one of the greatest saints of youth. His canonization was the Church's acknowledgement that his life was a pure reflection of the gospel. He lived intensely but humbly, seeking in everything to do God's will. His witness calls each of us to do the same. Saint Gabriel continues to intercede for all those who turn to him in faith. His life is a beacon that illuminates the path for those who wish to follow Christ with generosity and joy. His example encourages us to live our faith more deeply and to trust fully in God's mercy. The legacy of Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows remains alive, not only in churches and shrines bearing his name, but above all in the hearts of those who find in him a model of faith, purity, and surrender to God. His brief life, marked by love of the cross and devotion to Our Lady, is proof that holiness is a call accessible to everyone, regardless of age or circumstance. In a world where young people are constantly tempted by superficial ideals and fleeting illusions of happiness, St. Gabriel emerges as someone who found true joy in renouncing the world and giving himself entirely to God. He shows that it is possible to live youth with enthusiasm without straying from the faith and the values of the gospel. His witness is a reminder that spiritual consolations and joys far outweigh any material pleasure. He, who once lived amid the parties and vanities of the world, found much greater happiness when embracing the cross and following Christ wholeheartedly. His radical choice proves that true freedom lies in belonging entirely to God. Saint Gabriel is also a model for those who face trials and physical suffering. His serenity in the face of tuberculosis and his acceptance of God's will teach us that even illness can be a path to sanctification. He lived his illness without complaint, offering each pain as a sacrifice of love. His love for the Virgin Mary was one of the most striking features of his spirituality. From a young age, he understood that Our Lady is the best guide for those seeking holiness. He placed himself entirely under Mary's protection, trusting that through her he would reach the heart of Jesus more quickly. This devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows in particular was the great strength that sustained him in moments of difficulty. He meditated deeply on Mary's sufferings and united them to his own, learning to carry his cross with patience and love. This teaching continues to inspire many faithful who face trials in life. St. Gabriel's canonization was a moment of great joy for the Church, as it officially recognized his holiness and his example as a model for the faithful. His liturgical feast, celebrated on February 27th, is a special occasion to recall his witness and to ask for his intercession. Since his death, numerous miracles have been attributed to his intercession. Many people report being healed of serious illnesses after praying to him. These favors are signs that God continues to act through his saints, responding to the petitions of those who trust in Saint Gabriel's intercession. His tomb at the sanctuary of Isola del Gran Sasso became a true gathering place for pilgrims from around the world. Young people, families, and the sick go there in search of hope, consolation, and healing. Many leave the sanctuary spiritually renewed, sensing the nearness of God through the example of St. Gabriel. Passionist spirituality, to which St. Gabriel belonged, sees in him one of its greatest examples. He lived the congregation's charism profoundly, centered on contemplation of Christ's passion and on imitating Jesus' sacrificial love. His example continues to inspire new passionist religious to embrace their vocation with zeal. St. Gabriel also teaches us about the importance of prayer in Christian life. From the time of his conversion, he made prayer the center of his existence, seeking in God the strength to persevere in faith. He knew that without a life of intimacy with Christ, it would be impossible to attain holiness. Praying the Rosary was one of his favorite spiritual practices. He regarded the Rosary as a powerful weapon against temptation and a means of staying ever united to Mary and Jesus. His love for the Rosary encourages all the faithful to rediscover this essential devotion. His zeal for the things of God was evident in his obedience and humility. Even when his health was compromised, he never failed to carry out his religious obligations with love and dedication. This attitude teaches that fidelity to God is manifested above all in the small things of daily life. Many young people who struggle against temptations of impurity turn to St. Gabriel for help. His life testimony shows that purity is a virtue that can indeed be lived, and that God grants the necessary grace to those who desire to remain faithful to his commandments. His devotion to the Eucharist was another central aspect of his spirituality. He believed wholeheartedly in the real presence of Christ in the consecrated host, and therefore made each communion an intimate encounter with the Lord. He teaches us to value every Mass and to receive Jesus with a pure and prepared heart. St. Gabriel's humility was one of his most admirable qualities. Even though he was talented and came from an important family, he never sought prominence or recognition. He preferred anonymity and silent service, living hidden so that only God's glory would shine through his life. He also teaches us the importance of detachment. He renounced comfort, wealth, and worldly honors to follow Christ without reservation. His life prompts us to reflect on what truly matters and where we place our hearts. St. Gabriel reminds us that youth is not an obstacle to holiness, but a privileged time to love God with all one's fervor. He shows that it is possible to live with joy and intensity without falling into the illusions of sin. He was an example of how grace can completely transform a life. From a worldly and vain young man, he became a saint who was passionate about God. His testimony encourages all those who find it difficult to leave sin behind in order to follow Christ. St. Gabriel is also a model of perseverance. Even as his health deteriorated, he never lost hope or stopped trusting in God's goodness. His patience in the face of suffering is a lesson for those who endure illness and tribulations. Many priests and religious look to St. Gabriel as an intercessor because they see in him an example of fidelity to one's vocation. He is an inspiration for those who wish to follow God, but fear the renunciations that consecrated life requires. The Church continues to encourage devotion to him, urging the faithful to imitate his virtues and to seek his intercession. He is a model of simple but profound holiness, accessible to all who wish to live for God. His story invites each one of us to reevaluate our spiritual path. He teaches us that life is short and that we must live it seeking what truly matters, union with God and eternal salvation. His love for Jesus and Mary was the key to his holiness. He shows us that when we give our hearts entirely to God, we find true peace and joy. Today, St. Gabriel intercedes for all who come to him in faith. His example drives us to seek a holier, purer life, filled with the love of God. He teaches us that every suffering, when offered to God, is transformed into grace and salvation. His love for the cross is an invitation for us to embrace our own difficulties with trust in divine providence. The life of Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows is a witness that it is worth following Christ without reservation. He found in total surrender to God the happiness that the world could never give him. His constant smile, his patience in suffering, and his ardent love for God continue to inspire generations of the faithful. He shows us that holiness is possible and that God never abandons those who trust in him. Saint Gabriel of Our Lady of Sorrows remains a great intercessor and friend of young people, the sick and all who seek God. His life proves that holiness is the destiny to which we are all called. May his example inspire us to live with greater faith, greater love, and greater surrender to God. Saint Gabriel, pray for us.